Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Tim Richmond. Tim is the Executive Vice President and CHRO of AbbVie, a research-driven biopharmaceutical company with over 30,000 employees, serving more than 30 million patients in over 175 countries around the world. Tim, thank you very much for coming back down. We always appreciate having you here on campus.
It's great to be here. You know, you brought some great weather up for us. We're glad to be here. It's always wonderful. We're so impressed with the school, with the program, with the students. So it's a great thrill for us as well.
Thank you. So it's now really clear, you're a member of the executive leadership team, and it's clear that HR has its seat at the table. So we don't have to talk about that anymore. But can you say a little bit about where you think HR can make the biggest influence to driving company success, say in the next 5 or 10 years?
I still think the best manifestation of our work as HR professionals is if we think of ourselves not as the HR person, but as the business person that has a key role in human capital. So I've always looked at my job as helping to drive business performance. We know we're stewards of culture, principles, values, whatever it might be for you as a professional. But if we're really at our best, we're business people driving business performance. We know how we do it best. It's through the delivery of human capital. But I think the best HR people of the future will see themselves not at the table in a role when called upon, but at the table participating and contributing to business discussions with a lens around people, but helping the company make good decisions going forward.
So can you say a little bit more about that? What does that mean to think in terms of getting the human capital? I mean, I presume we mean getting the human capital in the right place at the right time.
Right. But
can you say a little bit more about how that really manifests itself to driving business success?
Well, I just know that one of the things that we have to do is deliver the talent the business needs. And so if I think of it that way, then I'm in tune with where the business is at first and foremost, right? Sometimes people will ask, well, what's your strategy from an HR perspective? And I first will say, well, I can tell you what my HR strategy is when I know your business strategy. So I always try and bring that business first focus. And what I've just found over time is, whether it's the CEOs or it's the executive leadership team, they're looking at you and they're wondering, what role are you going to play here? Are you going to be that kind of compliance role, process role, policy role? Or are you here with us? You know, are we in this together? And I think it's an element that I think is a nice way to bring a different view of HR in the role we play. And I always think if the business is successful, our success will follow. So I've really tried to think about our role as we're business people with this human capital focus. You're right that the best way we do that is delivering the talent. But then it encompasses all those HR pieces: how we attract people, how we develop people, how we assess people and make talent decisions, how we develop this talent engine in our company. But first and foremost, thinking business first, human capital element. And then I think that dynamic at the team really is much more positive, it's much more strategic, and you're much more in the mix versus kind of carving out this kind of niche type role.
So how do you get so as you said, the rest of the world is still putting HR in the box of what HR was in the 90s, maybe
Correct.
Just transactional,
Yep.
right? So how do you convince the rest of the team that this is a different world, that this is what drives business success?
Well, first you have to show strategically that you see that's your role, right? And if you can't show that, then people aren't going to understand what you're talking about or believe you. So you have to have that strategic thought. Then you have to be able to execute against it. So it goes back to some level of capability. So I can aspire for all I want, but if I can't execute against it, then I'm not going to be that valued partner. So there's a couple elements that are around strategy and capability. And then if I see that and I can execute against it, then I'm going to prove it, because I'm not going to be in the talent outcomes business. I'm going to be in the business of driving performance. And so people will see a lot more that comes from you because of that.
And now switching a little bit, so after the spin-off, I know very interesting opportunities and times for you as you have this very curious way of being basically entrepreneurs, but with a meaningful history behind you and real products. What kind of things did you do to affect that culture in the new group, in AbbVie itself?
It was one of the greatest challenges I've ever had professionally, but also it was one of the most fun things that I've done. Now, not every day was fun, not every moment was fun, but the context of it was new company. And to your point, it's not often you become a new company with that much kind of capability. You know, we had a revenue of around $19 billion. We had about 20,000 employees. So we had some capacity and capability to start. But culture then, the one thing that I feel most proud of, I suppose, is how much we've accomplished on culture over time. And one of the things that I kept saying to people is culture is not a program. Culture is reflected in everything that we do. How we talk, how we engage, how we execute. And so we really tried to get all of our people leaders activated. We tried to take a top-down approach by defining what culture meant at AbbVie. What would it look like? What were our expectations? We hardwired that into all of our people in talent and HR programs, so you couldn't avoid it. I'm a big believer in vertical integration, you know, that people have to see it and see the linkages everywhere. But also this kind of bottom up. And what we did is we activated culture ambassadors around the world. And we let them define at the affiliate level, it's what we call our countries, manufacturing sites, laboratories. We let them define what their priorities were. And some of them we never would have prioritized, but they did. That's all that matters. And bringing those two things together, we saw an incredible uplift around engagement, and also correlated highly with business performance. But just in the idea of what it's like to work at AbbVie, it's a fantastic story, if not the one thing, but all the things that were done to create our culture at our company.
So how has that culture changed over time? I mean, now you're a mature company, as it were. You know, 6 years in, right? So.
It is funny. I was telling some students last night at the reception that whether you join us now or you joined us at the beginning, January 1st of 2013, you're still here at the beginning. So we're going to try and thread the needle on. We'll finish our 7th year soon, and feeling like we have a little more confidence, to your point perhaps, of who we are, what it's like to work at AbbVie, whether it's literally getting to be known not just as a company, but as a premier company, what it looks like, what it feels like, but balancing that idea that we're still new, that we're still open to ideas, that we still say, bring your best self to work and help us make an impact. So for us, the challenge, I suppose, is not so much all the new things we're doing. So there's some element in work, as we know, just on sustaining. So there's this element of sustaining the gains that we've achieved, not going back to where perhaps you had been before. But then really importantly, how do we accentuate other opportunities that might exist? And maybe they're the ones that we left behind early, we prioritized other things. Maybe there's pockets here or there that we need to elevate where we need to. But the fun part for me is there's no finish line in culture. And so one of my, I think, perhaps good choices early on, we talked rarely about, well, HR wants to do this. What we typically say is, the company wants to do this, and it's all aligned to our objectives around culture. And then people would say, oh, well, it's culture. Well, of course. And then you would so we've had a lot of fun with that, using that as a key lever. But the fun part for me, 7 years in, more work to do, proud of what we've accomplished, but really excited still about all the things we have in front of us in the future.
Can you say a little bit, do you have thoughts on when culture became as important as it is? I mean, presumably it was always there, but it seems to have only become the popular topic in the last 5-10 years, maybe.
You might wonder sometimes, right, is this just the thing of the day? We've seen this, right? There are things that people will focus on and then they'll kind of move on to other things. I think with where we're at, and I think even outside of our workspace, there's lots of things going on in communities, there's lots of things going on around the world. And I think the idea of what does my company mean for me? What's it like to work here? And why would I choose to continue to work here? I think culture is becoming not just a nice thing, nice to have on the wall, but this important factor for why people come and work for certain companies, why they stay and grow with certain companies, and why they feel so proud to work for the companies. It drives high levels of engagement if you do it well. I think people are looking for that. I think there's a tangible element of demand that companies have responded to. I also think people have found out there's only so many variables that can truly differentiate a great company from a good company. And from my perspective, I always think, well, I want to be working for a great company. That's our aspiration for AbbVie. Why not us? So we're going to make culture a priority. For us, we were lucky in that it was one of our top 4 business strategies. It was literally top 4 business strategy as a new company. Not many companies have done that. So we had full commitment, full engagement. We were very fortunate, but it still is one of our top priorities. It's a foundational element of our strategy. So I think it's a differentiator. I think people want it, and I think that great companies have that benefit. And if you can get there and hold on to that, you're going to get your unfair share of the best talent, which should ultimately drive better business performance.
So what does it makes sense to me that better cultures bring better talent, and that's going to ultimately help you. Yeah. And you talked about this vertical of really making it a full vertical integration for that culture. What are some of the things that business leaders can do to really set that tone and create a culture of quality or of excellence, the way you were talking about it?
One of the most important things we had to get business leaders to understand all around our company was that when we were talking about culture, we were talking about them. Right? Culture's not, in fact, one of the background stories of this whole culture initiative at AbbVie was before the spinoff from Abbott, meeting with the future CEO of AbbVie. I've been named as the future head of HR for AbbVie, and we're having one of our first one-on-ones. And he's talking about how important culture is going to be. Of course, I'd love to hear that. I was excited to work for him. I was excited about the opportunity. But he said to me, I'd like you to lead the culture initiative. And he and I did not know each other well enough for me to say what I said next, but I said, well, you really shouldn't ask me to lead it. And then he looked at me funny, and then I said, but because I don't want our people to think, our leaders to think that this is an HR program, right? I mean, we need to make it, and so then I went through this whole thing about what I thought we needed to do. And then we were highly aligned on that. He said, that's exactly what I'm talking about, that's why I want you to lead it. And so one of the priorities was to get business leaders activated, such that culture was not an HR program, culture was not something that would happen to them. Now, there's some elements of that, right? You can't vertically integrate without setting standards, right? Holding people accountable, all those kinds of things. But the key thing for me was to have them understand that we were talking about culture, we meant them, and they had a role. So it wasn't something that they could just be passive in. We wanted them active, we wanted them clearly engaged in, and then we measured it. So we used our employee survey as a way to measure people leader effectiveness, to measure engagement, to measure culture in our priorities as it relates to culture. So they were getting feedback regularly, and one of the best things that happened early on is our CEO took the first results by leader, stuck them up on the wall and said, there you go. So you're talking about accountability, transparency, activating people. It was fantastic. So I've been thrilled with that, but that's how you get engagement. Oh, wait a minute, this is important. I have a level of accountability, rewards and recognition may follow. And there's some element that says if I don't raise the bar, if I don't get to at least the standard, then I'm going to have a different talent narrative. And so really hardwiring all that stuff was a huge factor in our success.
And you talked about working with the new CEO as the two of you were getting started in AbbVie. What are some of the things that you can do, or maybe CHROs in general, to help a new CEO transition into that role?
I think it's a great question, and it's one of the biggest challenges we have as an HR professional. When you think about that leadership transition, whether it's your CEO or other ELT members, I think the role that we play becomes even more accentuated. And if we're not skilled enough to think about the right selection to begin with, right? What's our role in helping them even just be assessed and selected for that role? Then once they're in that role and they're starting it, what's the onboarding look like? And what's it's not even the day one, it's like what's the first 90 days? What's the first 180? You just start thinking about what are the priorities, how do I help it drive? And I remember telling Rick this when we first started. I said, he must have thought, I was a new head of HR, but I had all my ideas and I was kind of ready in my own mind. And I said to him, I'm going to show up every day with two things on my mind. And the first one is, how do I help you be successful? The second is, how do I help AbbVie be successful? But I wanted him to know, day one, I'm on your team and my job is to help you be successful. So again, it's another way to pivot, what's my role? I didn't say to him, I'm going to show up every day thinking about how I can help you with your onboarding plan. But I wanted him to know. But now what that meant is we were signing up for great one-on-one dialogue. I was going to be highly transparent with him. I told him, I'm going to give you feedback all the time. Why? Because not enough people are going to give you feedback in this role. But I'm going to be, and you're going to decide if you like that or not, but I'm going to give it to you, right? So I think having clarity about the role and what you want as the outcome. I wanted the outcome for him to be incredibly successful. So I think the role that we play is critical. I think we have to have capacity and capability to be that coach. We have to have it to be that person who helps bring that team together, whether it's because you have a new CEO or new ELT members. So we have to be very in tune with, just as we do when we're earlier in our career, but that team and that focus, helping them be successful. I think it's the best part of our job, really, is that team dynamic, CEO engagement, helping them drive success, and then really the ELT, the executive team, getting lined up with them as well.
So you've mentioned the executive leadership team, the ELT, a few times there. So the first question is, does a team matter? Or is it, at that level, often the world, I think, thinks of it as just a group of highly performing people who maybe are in charge of their own groups, but we don't often think of it as a team. So is it really a team?
I think the team does matter. And I think particularly as it relates to kind of representing the company to the board, they're looking for that team dynamic. I think as it relates to, if you're a CEO and you don't have a team, I would think that'd be a really tough task. Now, I'm sure it's true. I don't think you're far off by suggesting you could have a collection of high-performing executives and somehow make it work. But I just wonder how long that's sustainable. So there's got to be some element of team. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have a group hug, every day when you go home, right? It doesn't have to be that type of team, but it has to be a team that's aligned to the vision, aligned around the business objectives, aligned to the ability to execute. And one of the great things about my company is we are those things, but we're also highly performance driven. So in the end, it's about our commitment to our shareholders. In the end, it's about our goals that we set. And there's no way we can achieve those without team. And I think very importantly, this is something I watch out for too, because if you had that team that was that strong set of individual performers, that might work, again, for a short period of time. What I really worry about is their teams. What we say to people is, we want you to be effective across. And very importantly, we expect you to do the same with your teams. And I think the best companies have that hard wiring that says, we can have a vertical. We all have a vertical. We report to someone. We get clarity. We get direction. We get feedback. But if I'm not working horizontally well, and I'm not getting my team to do the same, then I think we have a culture problem. I think ultimately we'll have a performance problem. I just think there's all kinds of things that become more complicated.
So that's very interesting. I mean, I have really not thought about it much, that the cohesion of the executive leadership team itself creates cohesion lower. Can you say a little bit more about how that works?
It's really important, because what I've seen many times is and I've been involved in different things over time where you knew there was something maybe not cohesive between two leaders, and you would see the teams almost mimic that behavior or be less willing to collaborate because, well, I'm not sure your person and my person are, and you think, what are we doing, right? So I just think it's the right thing. You go back to like culture, you go back to expectations for leaders. And we teach this. Our enterprise leadership model is literally just that. You and your role, you and your team. That's the functional role that you have. Your job, you have to be good at your job. You have to have a team that's effective in their role. But you have to play across at the peer level and get your teams to do the same. And it's those two things together that's our enterprise leadership expectation. So we teach that, we reinforce that, and that goes back to culture and the clarity. We set people leader expectations. We create this enterprise leadership model as our expectation, because we know without doing that, we're not going to be as effective.
So you talked about a lot of things that make it sound like how make it clear how important that executive leadership team is.
Yeah.
Are there other characteristics? So you talked about the cohesion of working around. Are there other things that stand out to you that identify a team as being more successful than one that will be less successful?
It's a great question. I think ultimately we get measured by performance, right? And I think a great team ultimately has to be able to execute. So I think that would be a variable I'd be looking for. If someone came in and said, tell me about this team, I would first say, well, tell me how they're performing. What's their outcomes? What's their results? And I think if I'm looking at a diagnostic, I'm going to start with a little bit of that. I'm also going to look at what kind of turnover do they have. I'm going to look at, are we constantly churning? I'll take our company as an example. We've had a great continuity of our executive team. And that's worth something. It's valuable. We trust each other. We've been through, whether it's the separation from Abbott, or we've been through these product launches, or we've been through these acquisitions. That familiarity and that trust that's built from experience together is really valuable. So I think that's another dynamic to watch for. When I look at teams, I think, where are people at? Where do they come from? What have they been taught? Are they clear about our own expectations? And so I think there's a huge role for HR on team effectiveness. We actually, again, go back to culture, made cross-functional team effectiveness a huge priority.
So do you spend much time really working on building the team? Like we would think about how do you build teams at other levels of the organization?
We probably spend not as much time. If you said just create your perfect world, how often would you spend more time on those things? We probably spend less, very candidly. But it doesn't mean we don't spend time on it. You have to spend enough time on it. The nice thing from my standpoint is we have that continuity, so we don't have to go back to basic principles often. because we've been through a lot together. We know each other, we trust each other, and that's built, and that's worth something. I would think, though, if you had lots of turnover, you would want to spend more time on, let's just go back to first principles, on team, each other, interacting, expectations of the team, expectations of our behaviors within the team. We don't have to spend as much time on that because of that continuity that we've had. But I imagine with change and with turnover over time, that you'll have to spend more time on that.
So it makes perfect sense that over the life cycle there will be, as the team is newer, maybe more time spent on that. As it gets more mature, maybe less.
And that's exactly right. We did that at the spinoff. We had lots of the things you might expect that we would have had. Small groups, large groups, some depth around alignment, clarity, but also that team element. And you're right, I think as more comes, you'd step back to that.
So can you just say a little bit more about what that was like? Like, what are some of the things where you were doing to help create that cohesiveness of the team, which clearly has been extremely effective?
Yeah, I mean, we used some of the work as part of the vehicle for team. And so just some examples, we in creating even our concepts for culture. And I was telling the story the other day to a new group of directors at AbbVie. And it's a fun story to tell because they can all relate. Imagine the flip chart exercise, right? We're thinking about culture and what it looks like, and we have a large group of leaders, over 100 people, and we're articulating to each other what that would mean for you. And well, tell me, Anthony, what you think that would mean for you. And we write it down, and someone else would input. And classic flip charting around the room. And then classic, get out your colored stickers, and now everyone's voting on these different things. And so in the end, the output of all that are these things we call the ways we work, which is our articulation of our behaviors and expectations, primarily around culture, but also now about other things like people leadership. But that, in the end, was an exercise for clarity on culture, but ultimately was an exercise that built a stronger team. Alignment, because we're all there. You could say, look, you were part of that, we created that together, but also this idea of we experienced something together, we built some trust together. And that's a nice dynamic.
So once again, thank you very much for joining us here. We sincerely appreciate it and love having the AbbVie team down, and you're always a great treat for me to talk to and learn from.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and we'll come back again soon.
You just listened to another CHRO conversation. Today, Tim Richmond of AbbVie shared his views regarding the role of HR in driving business success. He also shared ideas for how HR can facilitate innovation to help advance company success, while helping to improve the quality of healthcare around the world. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.